good to go.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Monday, February 3rd, 2025, and this is a meeting of the city's Capital Committee. And thank you for joining. Our agenda today, if you recall, this is similar to the process we had last year. This is to sort of kick off the presentation outlook for what our capital budget for FY26 may look like. We have assembled the capital committee. I did want to point out that I do have anyone new, and I wanted to point out that Michael Benoist, also known as Jim Benoist, who's the new deputy budget director, is joining us, and he's here today. And then I don't. Rich? Did you want to identify Matt? Introduce Matt.
Yes. So I've asked Matt Perot to attend. Matt is my second in command, and so God forbid something should happen to me, I would like Matt to understand how this all works and what needs to be done. And so this is his first meeting. He's sitting in just to watch the process, if you will.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Matt. Okay, on the agenda today, we did a few things. We wanted to sort of refresh our memory about some of the appropriations we had prior, and I think Rich, if you wanted to talk anything about some of the larger projects we've had currently ongoing. I did also want to review sort of preliminary outlook of the funds that will be available for appropriation in FY26. This is largely based on preliminary estimates of the sales tax going forward, which is as we continue to review, that may be adjusted during the third quarter, as well as any other sources. The biggest one being the prior year's surplus. Last year we had over $35 million. This year is going to be somewhat less than that, 2021. And then we'll talk about the updated version that BPS has been working on. We received some requests from departments updating the capital needs inventory. So without any further delay, Rich, did you want to go through any sort of update of the existing projects that are worth mentioning today?
I do. So what I would like to mention is the projects that I'm going to kind of go over here and just give you some brief snapshots of where we are to show you that we are actually in progress with a good portion of this money. The staffs have been really busy with working on day-to-day stuff as well as all the ARPA stuff as well. But what the projects I'm going to talk about here are from Ordinance 71661, which would have been the 2023 general obligation bond, and that was for $21 million, and from Ordinance 71629, which is Board Bill 168, and that would have been capital funding for $49,049,000. So I'll just walk through and give you guys some highlights on them, and then at the end, if there's any particular questions that you want to ask, I'll be glad to talk about those if I can. So traffic management enhancements phase 4. You hear these things come up a lot. This is a grant funded project. Clara, Belt, Euclid, Walton, Taylor, Newstead, Pendleton, and Sarah.
Hey, Rich.
Yes.
Hey, Rich, I could bring up the exhibits from the ordinance if it's helpful. But
that's fine. I mean, I'm going back and forth between the two of them, so okay. I don't know if you want to do that or if that's going to be. Can you bring it up?
What ordinance was it? The big one.
This one is 71661. Why don't you do that, and then I'll look down 71661, and then I'll go back to the other one.
Okay, very good.
Thank you. That's the 2023 GOB.
All right. 71661. Here we go. All right.
Thank you.
Sure. Pull that up.
Okay. So traffic management enhancements phase 4 at the top of the list. About $880,000 cost. That's a grant funded project. That $880,000 is a federal match. The design for the project was funded under a different source. The design is 65% complete. So as quick as we get the design done, we will move to the construction obligation, which that funding is for, and we will put it out to bid. The next project on the list there is underground lighting vaults, and that was a $500,000 project. There's also a companion project with that under the FY 25 1205 fund. We'll talk about next. 500,000 traffic division is currently engaged with the consultant Crawford Bunty and Braemar, working on scope and design fees, and a work order should be completed with that next month. The next project on the list is Compton Bridge over Mill Creek. That $4 million is the local match share. For this project, the design is 95% complete, and we have encumbered $2.2 million. We've expended $1.7 million. And as quick as we get a couple pieces of right of way accomplished and get those taken care of, and then we are working on a little bit of a value engineering at this time because the bid actually came in, or the engineer's estimate came in over budget. We will dwindle that down to the point where we can get a reasonable number to work with, and we'll put that out for a bid for construction. The next two projects on the list, Lindell Union over Forest Park Parkway and Lindell Union over Metro. Those again are federal grant projects. We have grants for. There are two different bridges, but it's the same location. We are currently working on the design for both of them. And so we have encumbered a little over $250,000. We've expended about $2.3 million. And the designs on those are both 60% complete. That's over by Forest Park at Lindell Union in that area. The next project on that list is Loughborough Design Project in Cronowet Park. We just started the design on that. We're about 5% completed. So we have not encumbered or expended any funding. Now, again, some of these, when I say we haven't done anything with them, we've turned in work authorizations and so forth, and we're waiting for them to be processed down in the comptroller's office. I'm not going to walk through all the bridge projects. What I will tell you is all of them plans are being prepared and coordinated with different folks like Metro and so forth. And when the plans are completed, we will put those repairs out for emergency work authorizations. Miscellaneous bridge item that is on there at this moment in time, we have not expended anything out of that. We will use that as funding comes forward. Parks Department pool renovation. So if you remember, this project originally was a $7 million project, and we have funded $3 million of it. $1 million of it was funded through this particular ordinance. And the Parks Department is currently, there's nothing been expended yet. It is currently working on bids for pools at Wool and 12th and Park Rec Centers. Different things going on there with piping, plumbing, pumps, window replacement around the pool, and so forth. The next item is fire department garage storage repair replacement. And see here, that project is completed. Came in a little bit over budget. Came in at $771,000. We made up the additional $21,000 through miscellaneous building repair funding that this committee has allocated for me to utilize in cases like that in emergencies. The next item on the list is the funding for 184 apparatus purchases, which was supplemental funding to pay for fire apparatus that was not completely able to be funded under Board Bill 184. All the funding has been expended except for about $300,000. That $300,000 we will look to do a transfer and spend that on an ambulance, which is a little bit further down the list, actually, in the other ordinance when we get to that one. Then we have the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department HVAC system that services the seventh floor. That work is completed. That work came in under budget by a little bit more than $60,000. And what I'm gonna also ask on that one is that we transfer that $60,000 to the Police Academy HVAC unit that is underfunded, and I believe that is, let's see, is that farther down this list or on the other one? It's on the other list. And then miscellaneous building repairs on this list for $170,000. All that funding has been expended for emergency repairs such as roofing, plumbing, HVAC, electrical. As needs come forward, my staff identifies the need, and then we go ahead and we fund it and get it repaired under those funds. So, Paul, if you want to put up the other ordinance, which is 71629.
Right.
That should be Board Bill 168.
71629.
Yes, sir. Okay.
All right. Let's see.
So on that one, arterial street paving, that funding, that $6 million in funding there is all part of the arterial street paving project. And all that work the funding has been encumbered, and the projects are scheduled to begin construction here in the spring and be completed by December of 26. The Louisiana Com Street project is a grant project, and that is the $440,000 match share that goes along with that. The design was funded from a Ward funding source. And so the design is about 2% complete, but we've not spent anything out of that match share for construction yet. Boiler replacements at parks. Let me get to that one. So let me give you guys a setup on this one. So the boiler replacements at the rec centers, we originally had an item of $5,224,000. This particular item funded 1.530 million of that. There was some out of Board Bill 184, and then there was $1 million out of the FY25 capital budget. That line item now stands at 750,000. So where we are with the boiler replacements is Parks is working on that particular item. Parks has spent, let's see, $783,382 spent, and they've encumbered $746,000+. They spent funding for boiler replacements at Gamble, Marquette, and Wool, and that's included the boilers and the associated pieces of equipment that go along with those. So much of that work has already been completed. The next item is Soulard Market renovations. That is another one that we have multi-year funding on. That item originally started at $8.5 million, and we have funded $4,948,000 of it through capital, Board Bill 168, through capital budget 25, through 1110 use tax fund major projects, and through economic development sales tax. So the remaining balance that we have in the capital for that item is $3,552,000 that we still have not funded. And where that project stands, this particular item is the boilers. Let's see, boiler replacement design, environmental installation has been completed on that particular project, and there's $337,000 left, and that will be used for remaining appurtenances that go along with the boilers at Soulard Market. Now, at the end of the day, if there's anything remaining at Soulard on any of these items when we get done, we'll ask to just transfer that money into other uses at Soulard so that it completes what it was set out to do, and then ask that it be reappropriated to do additional items that would be needed at Soulard Market. So it stays in its parent location. Replace 6 ambulances. This is the one I referred to before for the fire department. 5 of those ambulances were replaced, and there was a remaining balance of $164,000 that was not enough to buy another ambulance. So we would use the funding from above the residual funding I had talked about from the previous item from the apparatus purchases, and we would put that coupled together with this funding, and that would be able to buy the 6th ambulance that was utilized, need to be utilized out of that particular line item. The next item on the list is St. Louis Police Department take-home vehicles, approximately 57,000 for 60 of those. And so for that particular item, we have expended all but about $347,000. And at this point, the police department is currently submitting a PO for the remaining 6 Tahoes, and we'll see how the bids come in on those, but somewhere in that neighborhood of 5, 6, we should be able to pick up with that remaining balance. Other municipal buildings, the courts building, fire alarm replacement, the civil courts fire alarm replacement, we have encumbered $1,193,000. We've expended $706,000, and the project is 45% completed. The Carnahan Courthouse fire system upgrade was 2.4. We have encumbered $2,033,000, and we have spent $366,000, and the project is 20% completed. So those are both well underway to being done. And then city vehicles is the final category here. Electric vehicle recharging infrastructure, incremental cost of battery electric vehicles for $600,000. We have encumbered $335,600, and there's about $254,000 remaining. There are EV charging stations at Forest Park, installed at Forest Park, the forensic lab, the Muni garage, and all the money is actually obligated and will be spent. So I don't show that I do show that. So 335,000 is encumbered, 264,000 is expended. So we will spend all that funding for those charging stations. Then we have city service, let's see. The next one is city service vehicle fleet replacements for $4.9 million. And that particular item, there is about $900,000 that has not been spent yet. The other $4 million has been spent. The vehicles have been arriving, and we are still in the process of developing specs and bidding out the remaining $900,000. So I think you can get a general idea that we're doing a lot in these different areas, and the work is progressing generally. So if you have any questions, let's try to field those. If we have vehicle questions, I'll see if Chris Amos can maybe help me out with those.
Rich, if I might, before the questions, the note there on the almost $5 million that says electric vehicles, that's actually the public works fleet. There are some electric vehicles on there, but it's only about 250,000 are electric vehicles. The rest of them are standard plows and refuse trucks and things like that. So I'm not sure how that, I guess it's just a part of what was in the ordinance got put there. So I don't want you to think we spent $5 million on electric vehicles. We didn't.
No, well, that's good clarification. It's showing that there's 600,000 in recharging infrastructure, and it's showing that the city vehicle service vehicles are 4.9 million. So the only part of that is electric is the 600,000 for the infrastructure.
Right.
That's correct.
Christina, I see your hands up. Why don't you go ahead?
Yes, I just had a question. If you could repeat, how many of the take-home vehicles for police were we able to actually achieve? Can you say it again? Of the well, of the, we're trying to do 105 total between a bunch of other places, but how many were we able to do with the money? And yeah, if you could
So
just restate that.
out of this particular line item, there were to be, let's see, 60 in Board Bill 184, 9 in the capital budget, and 36 in the FY23 supplement. So, Chris, you can correct me if I'm mistaken, but I believe the 60 in Board Bill 184, the 9 in the capital budget were all bought. And out of this particular last item, 30 out of those 36 were bought. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Yeah, it was done in two staunches because we couldn't get enough allocation from the GM factory to get them all at once. But the end result is that $2,400, the 2,400 or whatever it was for the police. Oh, 22,100,000. That bought 39 or 40 vehicles. I'm not sure exactly which that is, but that's what it'll be when we get the next 5 in, spending the rest of it. So it'll end up being 39 or 40 total that we were able to buy out of that because you see there we were planning on the things being only 57,000 a piece. They actually came in and bid for that for a little over 61. So we couldn't buy as many as we hoped.
So how
Sure.
many total, Chris,
Yeah.
did we wind up getting? I think that's what Christine would like to know. Out of all those funding that were there, how many total did we wind up buying?
Out of that particular fund, we ended up buying 39 or 40. 5 of them are
Out of,
still to
so
be
we were
delivered.
aiming for 105. How many did we end up with? Of the 105 we were hoping for? Somewhere
Well, the
around,
100, yeah, the
We met the
105,
105.
the 105, because that was a multi-year number.
yeah.
Right.
So we
So
got
we bought-
105?
I can't say for sure. I
Okay.
know we spent everything that was in ARPA that was designated for the police department on either patrol vehicles marked or on detective vehicles. And then we have this amount, and then the police department, unlike the other departments, gets a general fund amount in their 5525 account, so they buy additional vehicles with that. That's the reason why I don't know exactly how many of them end up coming out of capital and how many end up coming out of the general
Transfers.
fund.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So the
Go ahead.
bigger issue is that there was an agreement to buy 105, and this adds up to 105 from a variety of different funds. Right? We still have 105.
I believe that is correct from different funding sources, yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Rich. And I should also point out that I've asked, and ITSA, as well as Comptroller's office, we're still working on a sort of consolidated report from Oracle that would track each one of these, both from expenditures and encumbrances and commitments and available balances, so we can produce, so that we can look at. Want to make sure that we're able to trace it back to the original appropriation, and that's what they're working on now. So hopefully we can get some reports on that in our future on capital projects. Are there any other questions on this? Great. All right. Well, let me pull up our next item. Can everyone see this? I'll make it larger. This is a preview of the capital fund budget for next fiscal year, FY26. This should be familiar. This is the familiar format that we use each year. First column, you can see the FY25 budget. Capital budget was $81 million in various sources. FY26 preliminary numbers, we're looking at a 61.6 million. And let me go through some of these details. Half-cent capital sales tax, that's our largest source of single largest source of revenue, tax revenue anyway, to the capital fund. We're slightly trailing this year, although if you look at last year, we did have some negative balances this year. It's going to be close. I'm not assuming a negative balance at this point. We'll see what happens with the third quarter. But we have noticed that the growth has slowed. So for fiscal 26, I'm estimating less than 1% growth in at sales tax, and I got it at just under $23 million overall for the capital budget. The Metro Parks, there's two of those, the 10th cent and the 3/16 cent. On the 10th cent, the city receives 50% of that, with the other 50% of that tax going to the Metro Parks region district. And with Metro Parks 3/16, the city receives 40% of those proceeds. And so both of those are estimated respectively at 2.1 million and 3.2 million respectively. Of course, they follow the trends in the overall sales tax. The economic development sales tax is similar. 10% of the economic development sales tax is allocated towards the capital fund, and that estimate would be $2.4 million. Last year, we did have some beginning balance in the economic development sales tax, though we've appropriated that, and I don't anticipate that going forward. And then we also had some negative balances starting, again, depending on what sales tax does this year. We'll see whether that's adjusted. It's very close, so I'm not currently assuming the negative balances in those accounts. The biggest change on this budget is as I mentioned earlier, is that by policy, 1/2 of any prior year operating surplus is allocated to the capital fund. Last year, that was $35.9 million. This year, it would be $21.2 million. So that's a decline of over 15 million, or approximately $15 million or $14 million. So we're going to have less discretionary capital this year, although in looking historically, this is still a significant dollar amount for capital. And the next item, courthouse restoration funds, that's pretty flat. That's based on revenues received in the special for the courthouse facility trust fund, and that is pretty flat each year. I did want to point out that gaming revenues has declined this year. We're expecting they're down 15.9% to the fiscal second quarter, which I expect to fall short this current fiscal year, and so I've got a significant reduction there. I'm only putting $180,000 towards that capital fund next year. And another reduction, the gasoline tax. Last year, if you remember, we had about a $1.4 million in extra funds that overestimate. So we budgeted the amount to give it the $7.7 million. But I noticed this year it's trailing, and we also ended the year short at the end of last fiscal year. I've got to call on the state to check and see whether or not there was some reduction that was not reflected in the FY23 actual numbers or such. But because of that, I'm after you reduce the one-time money from last year and a slightly lower recurring piece, I've got $5.3 million. Now that's all allocated to street and bridge projects. So that's what we're going to be allocating it towards, and whatever that goes to once we go through the inventory and assess where we are on those projects. The other remaining items are pretty much the status quo from the previous year. The Carnahan Courthouse debt service at $2.1 million. The general fund transfer for the refuse garage debt service at $500,000. Municipal garage debt or municipal garage revenue to offset some of that debt service at $185,000, and the rent revenues of $400,000. That comprises our total $61.6 million preliminary revenue estimate for the capital fund for FY26. And looking down the uses, which we are going to be talking about more in detail, we do have existing debt estimated at $7.3 million. Still waiting for some final debt service schedules. We'll make sure that those are adjusted. We did have one item dropping off this year, so that made it lower, but I'm going to make sure that we've got everything covered in that amount. Road and bridge improvements, again, that's programmed to meet whatever the gas tax allocation is. That would be $5.3 million. Same as the economic development sales tax, whatever that amount is. We've been using that for the NGA debt service as well, with whatever remaining goes to Soulard market improvements. And then the city building improvements and equipment are similar to last year, although it has declined because of our decline in other miscellaneous sources. And then, of course, the big discussion is going to be in the $21.2 million, which is going to be our discretionary funds for capital next year, and which we have to discern where we're going to allocate those funds. Everything else on this list is pretty much designated by ordinance. We do have the $1.3 million, which goes for engineering design services for both streets and BPS. The $10.8 million is for the ward improvements, is 1/2 of the allocated half-cent sales tax revenues. Major parks and debt and improvements are the allocations from the metro parks, as well as the 17% of the half-cent sales tax, which goes for park improvements. Rec center improvements is 3% of the half-cent sales tax receipts, and police department receives 10% of the half-cent sales tax receipts. So that's just a snapshot overall, but it gives you an idea from the 30,000-foot view of what we are looking at in terms of available capital revenues to appropriate next year. Again, while it's less than last year, I've seen these years in which we've had pretty much not much of anything. So the big discretionary piece we have in here, as I mentioned, is the $21 million from the prior year surplus. Are there any questions about this? Great. And as we go through this, we're about to go through this, take a sneak peek at the inventory that Rich has been working on. We are going to be beginning reviews with the Citizen Advisory Committee. We're going to be taking more detailed looks at the Capital Committee once that process is complete later in March, and to come up with some recommendations for what we would like to fund for FY26. All right. Well, let's dig into the inventory then.
All right, you ready for me, Paul?
Okay, yeah, and this inventory is comprised of many things that Rich and his group has been putting together. We also received separate requests from various departments that he's incorporated in this. I should mention that sometimes we get requests that aren't really capital, let's say that are more either a maintenance item or an operational item. In that respect, we would pull that out, so that might not be seen there. And we also, items typically are capital if they're multi-year large items. Anything less than $50,000 or so, we usually assign that as an operating, tell folks to put that in their operating budget request, and we'll deal with it that way. I have been, and Rich will acknowledge this, and I've sort of discussed this. Given our limitation of funds, I've noticed that if it becomes yellow and green, it's less likely to fund it. And I know there tends to be a migration towards the critical column. So we'll have to be looking at that as well to see once we weigh these projects out. But this is what we have today, and it's been fairly steady. Even though we continue to invest in capital, we see the dollar amount being fairly steady of $500 million or so. So that being said, Rich, I'll leave it to you. Let's go through what you've got.
Okay, thank you. So just a few introductory statements. So as Paul mentioned, there were a number of items that were carried over from previous years. Obviously, we also received through the budgeting process with Paul, through different departments, the write-ups on some additional items which have been incorporated here. Please keep in mind, this is a draft and we need to update it. So as I go through this, I'm going to try to talk about each item a little bit briefly. I am going to stay just to critical items because obviously with $145 million of critical needs and a little over $30 million in capital funding, there's really no need to talk about the other items unless somebody just has something burning that they would like to look into in one of those other columns. But again, as it's a draft, I'm going to tell you there are a handful of items on here, which as we go through this, I will tell you to just exit off your list. It needs to be removed. Either we completed it before, it is no longer needed, or something along those lines. This list is very dynamic. I was still updating it last Friday evening, well after we circulated. So stay with me on some of the changes a little bit. So as I mentioned, the critical needs across all these departments that are listed on the front page are about $145.5 million. The first group we're going to talk about is streets. And before I actually get into each of the items for streets, I want to say that we had an additional category recommendation that came up this year. Per ordinance 71882, the Complete Streets Ordinance, which was effective on August 31st, 24, Complete Streets Advisory Committee made recommendation to the city's capital committee on transportation and mobility related projects for inclusion and prioritization in city's capital improvement plan. So as I go through these, what you will notice is there are some of these items that are highlighted in green, and those are the items. There were 9 items that were recommended by the Complete Streets Committee, and those 9 items are recommended in green. So for example, the first item that is on the list, which is Cass Avenue streetscape from Tucker to Grand. We have funded this one before. Previously, it was in some different pieces. Now it is one entire project. It is about a $21 million project. The match share remaining is about 1.2 million. And this thing, I will give you a little description of it here in a second, but it has been cobbled together with some congressional earmarks, some funding from LCRA, which were the NGA bonds, and then some capital funding that we put towards it last year. But what the write-up is on this particular project is this is $1.2 million asking for sufficient to complete the local match share requirements for the planned Cass Avenue relocation between Tucker and Grand Boulevard. Well, we have applied. We just applied last week for an East-West Gateway STP program grant for this project. The reconstruction of Cass Avenue between Tucker and Grand is the top priority for the city. Portions of Cass Avenue, especially in proximity to the NGA West and the former Pruitt-Igoe site, are in severe disrepair and lack of basic elements like sidewalks. The entire project corridor is also a top tier in the top 10% of the city's roadway high injury network. The draft design of the project would reconstruct the roadway incorporating elements like a road diet, safer lane configuration, reconstructed ADA compliant sidewalk, and wider multi-use path on the north side of the street. The project connects to housing and schools. Will also integrate funded projects like the Brickline Greenway on Grand and 20th Street cycle track. And then partial funding has already been committed, as I talked about. So that is a critically needed project, and that is for $1.2 million. And we have applied for an STPS grant for the remaining, but it has not been approved yet. We just applied for it. The next critical project is the ADA transition plan, which is certainly not a new project. This has been on the list multiple times in the past, and we have funded this. This is a $2.1 million project, and again, an ask of the Complete Streets Committee. And just a little history on that one. The city of St. Louis adopted an ADA transition plan early in 2024. The plan helps prioritize activities and projects to improve accessibility and achieve ADA compliance overall within the right-of-way city buildings and city services. Over the last 2 years, the city's annual budget has included funding allocation for activities and projects identified in this plan. The funding has made improvements within city facilities and parks, such as constructing accessible restrooms and accessible pathways. It's also been spent to expand the scope of existing roadway projects to include more sidewalk and curb ramps. The funding recommendation for FY 26, as I mentioned, is $2.1 million. And this is not a grant funded project. This is simply a local funded project. The next project is River to Pier Boulevard improvements. This is also a recommendation of the committee, $19.7 million. We have a design, we have a STPS grant for that project, and the design was funded separately for that project. The background on that project is funding for the first phase of the design, right-of-way easement acquisition, River to Pier Boulevard reconstruction project. The city has been awarded funding through Surface Transportation Program Grant in 2024, $19.7 million project, largely reconstruct River to Pier Boulevard between Lansdowne and Gravois, adding a variety of typical safety features to this current substandard roadway. Safety features will include adequate lane widths, drainage improvements, pavement reconstruction, intersection modifications, guardrails, center medians, and improved bus stops. There are no significant impacts to the adjacent Greenway Trail. The funding allocation would only cover a portion of the initial design if we chose to, which we could either fund the entire match share of $3.940 million, or we could fund just the design portion, which is $20,000. So the question is whether we'd want to fund just that initial $20,000 for the design and right-of-way phase, or we would want to fund the remaining balance. The remaining balance of that project would be needed in FY 27. We need to come back and fund about $3.4 million. So that's a consideration. We could do that one in pieces if so desired. The next project on the list is number 16. Next page, arterial street paving. That is a $10 million place marker. And so there's actually no write-up on that, and that was not submitted by anyone, but we leave that on the list simply for the fact that, street department would have a program to continue this arterial street paving once the ARPA street paving projects are completed, in addition to those 5 corridors. So this is a place marker. There's no particular corridor earmarked for this. It could be an amount anywhere between 0 and 10 million if the committee had the funding and the appetite to fund the item. But it is definitely needed on major arterials throughout the city. The next item on the list is the underground lighting vaults. This is the remaining $1 million, remaining $1 million that, let me see this one for a second. This remaining $1 million, this was a $2 million project originally. We funded $500,000 through the 2023 GOB. We funded $500,000 through the FY 25 capital budget. This is the remaining, and this is for the replacement of the 11 underground lighting vaults in the city. We do have $1 million on the table, so roughly we should be able to get approximately half of those done. This would finish the funding of those replacement lighting vaults. Same thing with the signal detection and timing. That was originally a $2 million project. We funded $1 million of it through FY 25 capital budget. And there was $1 million left. Again, that would be the remaining balance of what was originally asked for by streets. And this is loop detection, timing of signals, and so forth throughout major corridors in the city. The next item on the list is a recommendation from the committee as well, the Complete Streets Committee. This is traffic management enhancements phase 7 from Broadway, South Broadway to Marceau to Carroll. This is a $10.5 million project with a local match share needed of $1,860,000. This particular project was funded in 24, so we do have a grant for it in place already. And the write-up on this one is funding sufficient to complete the local match requirements for South Broadway traffic enhancements. City of St. Louis has been awarded funding via congestion mitigation air quality CMAQ grant program for this project in 2024 and needs to commit the remaining required local funding contribution. This is approximately a $10.5 million project, would replace the modernized traffic signals and improve signalized intersection and ADA facilities at intersections throughout South Broadway corridor from Broadway and Marceau to Broadway and Carroll Street. All right. The next is also a recommendation of Complete Streets Committee. This is Traffic Management Enhancements Phase 8. And that is a $7 million job. And that is a companion project as well. So funding sufficient to complete a local funded match requirements for a planned North Broadway traffic enhancements Phase 8. So we have a grant. We have a grant for that project. City of St. Louis has been awarded via the congestion mitigation air quality CMAQ program for this project in 2024 and needs to commit to remaining required funding contribution. Approximately $7 million project would replace the modernized traffic signals and improve signalized intersection ADA facilities at intersections through the North Broadway corridor from Broadway and Cass to Broadway and Riverview. And again, the local match there is $1.240 million. The next item is traffic management enhancements Phase 9. This project we are seeking funding for. We just sent in the grant application last week. Funding sufficient for initial local funding requirements for the planned McCausland Skinker Traffic Enhancements Phase 9 project. The city has applied for an East-West Gateway funding grant for the congestion mitigation air quality program for 2025. The project would replace and modernize 20 traffic signals and improve signalized intersections and ADA facilities throughout the corridor between Arsenal Street and Etzel, and evaluate lane changes and new sidewalk connections north of Rosedale. And the estimated local match funding for this project is $2.440 million, but this one again could be broken down if need be due to funding to where we asked for $400,000 for design and right of way this time. And then we would ask for the additional $2 million in fiscal year 28, if that was so desired to break that apart. The next item is a Christie Boulevard cycle track and pedestrian improvements from Holly Hills to Kings Highway. $3 million project, $620,000 match share. This is funding sufficient for initial local funding match requirements. Planned Christie Greenway extension between Holly Hills Avenue and Kings Highway Boulevard along Christie Boulevard through Joseph Leisure Park and Christie Park. The city has applied for an East-West Gateway funding transportation alternative program TAP grant for 2025. And this one, the estimated local match share for the project is $620,000. But again, the same thing, we could break this one out into design and right away for $120,000 this year, and then pick up the remaining balance of it in fiscal year 27. The next item on the list is bike facility improvements. And that particular project is a local match project. So what I'd ask you to do is to, on the far right scratch where it says applied for grant, please X that out. I mean, there is no grant for this. This is a local funded project. And this is funding sufficient to improve pavement markings and features of existing on-street bicycle facilities. Depending on the location, this will include restriping existing bike lanes, newer replacement durable thermoplastic bike lane symbols, and thermoplastic sharrows, updates to the city installed bike facilities, which may only have conventional paint markings, and added stock of necessary features for certain bike facility elements like zebra delineators, flexible posts, etc. The project may also include spot upgrades where feasible, such as enhanced crosswalk markings, or green MMA pavement markings in needed areas. In order to maintain the expanding network of bike facilities in the city, funding allocations in this category should be annually or periodically recurring. And again, this is a local request of $1.2 million. And that we still have another one from this committee as well. So that would end the streets projects. I'm going to do the two bridge projects, and then we can stop and see if anyone has any questions on streets and bridges. So if you'll go to B for bridges, there are two that are still on here. We have the removal of the east approach on the MacArthur Bridge in East St. Louis. It's critical. We've talked about this in the past. It's about $3 million. We are working on an agreement with the city of East St. Louis to take that from us at no cost to the city. That is in process. I don't have any more updates on that at this moment. We would need to process an ordinance to allocate that to them should that move forward. And then the final project that was recommended by the Complete Streets Committee was Old Stable Bridge on Theater Drive. It's a $3 million project, $600,000 local match share, and that project is funding sufficient for an initial local funding match requirements for the planned replacement of Old Stable Bridge on Theater Drive in Forest Park. The bridge is approximately 600 feet west of Pagoda Circle, crosses over one of the waterways in the park. The bridge is 103 years old and in need of replacement. The bridge is an off-system bridge, meaning that it is not on a major roadway. The project will seek funding from East-West Gateway Off-System Bridge Replacement, the Rehabilitation Program BRO funds. The total cost will be approximately $3 million. And the local match share for the entire project is $600,000. But again, we could break this one into pieces. We could ask for $120,000 for the design of the project, and then we would take the remaining $500,000 in fiscal year 27, if so desired. So I'm going to stop there for a minute and take a breath, see if anybody has any questions on any of those.
I see a couple of hands. I've got some questions myself, but we'll start. I don't know who was first. Go ahead, Christina. Oh, Nancy?
So I would like to know how the Complete Streets recommendations fit in with the upcoming mobility study, because I feel like those should kind of be joined at some point as to how we're doing that work to make sure that it is consistent with the new study. So that would be a point on that. On the East St. Louis Bridge, we have a written commitment, but they changed mayors, so we have to get a second and get a mayor to sign off to take that bridge back for us, and then we would be putting an ordinance in just for the final update. Somewhere they just switched to the mayor there again. And on the last one that you had up on the Stable Bridge on Theater Drive, is that in Forest Park forever? Is that in Forest Park?
Yes, it is in Forest Park, but it is the city's bridge.
I think it might be worth us having a conversation with them before we go much further to see if there's a way that they might work with us on that, given the big settlement, the big agreement we just made with them about maintenance inside the park. They may not agree to do this particular maintenance project, but I think it wouldn't be a bad idea for us to approach them on this. So just a thought, given how much time we've spent with them in the last year trying to get the other projects going. So
So generally, I'll just make a couple comments. I think that's a great comment, Nancy, to talk to Forest Park Forever and see if they would have any funding that they would be willing to put towards the bridge in the park. They have been good partners with us in the past. Most of these recommendations from the Complete Streets Committee have been vetted between PDU, Scott, BPS, John Kohler, as well as Jackie with the Transportation Mobility Plan. Keep in mind, these are all generally, other than the last one on the bicycle markings, these are all East-West Gateway grant projects that we have all kind of talked about, that we get so many grants per year, and we submitted those as the priorities for this particular year. But yes, they've all been talked about. There's nothing there other than possibly this conversation on the bicycle markings, which really is a refresh of what is there more than anything, and that's locally funded.
Right, but I think they're looking for a different type of refresh through the mobility study, and I want to make sure we don't move on something that's not what people were looking for through the study. So that's
Noted.
the one flag, and the ones on the cycle and track and peds as well. So as long as we're having all those conversations, I'm fine with that, to make sure everybody on the call knows that those conversations are happening.
Okay. Christina, did you still have your hand up?
Yeah, mine's a quick question. Does the Complete Streets Committee recommendations, is there like an accompanying write-up or report, or is this all we get?
No, it's a memo that was sent to Paul. Paul, I just read what the memo actually stated. Paul, if you want to share that, that'd be great.
I don't. I have to find it. What I also
necessarily mean share it.
I'll definitely
I'm going to send it out.
Yeah, I get a lot of stuff. Let me dig it up, and I will definitely circulate it to the committee, and I also post it onto our website with all the other stuff. I don't actually, now that you mentioned it, I remember you dealing with it, but I don't remember actually looking at the hard copy. So, but I'll pull that up and we'll circulate it out.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Alderwoman Schweitzer, I see your hand's raised.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for circulating the Complete Streets recommendations. I think that the legislation for it does note that the Complete Streets Committee are supposed to be reviewing the recommendations of the Mobility Plan and Safety Action Network, to Director Cross's point that those are considered. So I look forward. I've received the memo, so I've seen it, but I'm glad that we'll make it public. Thanks.
And I'll also add that Nancy, I did also have the same reaction when I saw the Stable Bridge, because most of these items that we're talking are citywide capital, separate from the parks capital and all. So when I see something that's inside a park, my tendency is to look towards what other sources within the park they have to address those projects. But that's something we can talk about.
If I may jump in and follow up a question to Nancy regarding the MacArthur Bridge, is the idea in terms of those conversations with East St. Louis that the city of East St. Louis would fund and pay for the demolition of the bridge, would first acquire at nominal cost and then fund that demolition?
We don't care what they do with it. They're agreeing to take it.
Fine.
They want it standing as a bridge to nowhere, that's fine, but the goal is to take it off of our books, since it's actually on East St. Louis property, and Rich says for whatever reason, it never got folded in when they took the rest of the bridge down. So it's a hazard for them. It's a public nuisance, so I think they're prepared to take it down, but there's no money. I don't even think it's going to be a cost of $1 for them to take that from us, which is nice to get that $3 million off the books.
Agreed. Makes sense. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Rich.
All right, let's move on to C, Parks, Recreation, and Forestry. And so at the top of the list, item number 1, last year, you'll recall that Parks had a $10 million item there, and it was for park maintenance buildings. So we asked them to refine that and say, what is the absolute worst park maintenance building that you have that you need to redo? Sherman Park Maintenance, building, that building is currently condemned and it cannot be utilized by anyone. And so the Parks Department has asked for $750,000 to, redo the fence, the overhead doors, the tuck pointing, the structure, anything, the bathrooms in there that needs to be done to utilize the building. It would cost substantially more money to tear that building down and try to reconstruct something. So at the end of the day, being in a park and all the reviews from cultural resources and things along those lines, this was their most critical project that they had on their list for park maintenance building. So it's a $750,000 project. All right. We move on down. We talked about the pool renovations before. Again, I'll re-highlight that for everyone. The pool renovations started off at $7 million. We funded $3 million of it through other funding sources. We have a remaining balance of $4 million. That is for the renovation of 7 pools, pumps, tunnels, piping, electrical, decking, and all these type of things. Now, it does say fences around there. However, I want to say that fencing is a separate item. So that is something I would ask you to please disregard. But it's generally the operation of the pool or any appurtenances that are needed for the operation of the pool. Soulard Market renovations. We talked about that one just a bit. So that originally was an $8.5 million project. We funded $4,948,000 through other funding sources. The remaining balance is $3,552,000. And we call it miscellaneous building renovations because we're still working through the other funding sources. But generally, they start off with items such as the boiler replacement, mechanical replacement, plumbing, restrooms, fascia, gutters, tuck pointing, roof repairs. And so this will just continue on to do renovations work throughout that building to total up to $8.5 million, which is what the original project was set out. Now, someone was asked once upon a time what it would cost to renovate the entire facility, and its total, you're probably in the neighborhood of $25 to $30 million. So this is not a full facility renovation. This is critical items to keep the building safe and operational. The next item is HVAC rec centers, number 8. And that particular item was originally a $6 million item. We funded $1.3 million of that through FY25 capital. So the remaining budget amount is $4.7 million. And this is miscellaneous HVAC repairs at the 7 city rec centers. The next item on the list is Barrett Brothers Park Comfort Station, remove and replace. That's $1.2 million. That's a restroom facility in Barrett Brothers Park. It is take the building all the way down and put a new facility in its place. The next item on the list is the Clifton Heights Comfort Station roof and deck replacement. So that's the restroom facility in Clifton Heights Park. And that would be basically to take off the roof and the decking and replace that for $750,000. Next item on the list, and again, we'll get to that in a minute. Next item on the list, so Fallon Park YMCA parking lot repairs. This is the North City Recplex. The parking lot there is different than the one at the South Side Recplex. It is an asphalt parking lot. It is rimmed by low concrete curbs which run into rain gardens. The existing parking lot has been patched and patched and patched a number of different times. It's pretty much raveling up, and all that asphalt debris is going into the rain gardens, which creates issues with the runoff and so forth, as well as the parking of vehicles. The $675,000 is to come in and do a mill and resurface of that parking lot. The next two items are very similar. They've been on the list for a couple of years. Now, the first one is replace glass block exterior wall at the Wool Rec Center. And the next one is structural repairs to exterior walls, Cherokee Rec Center. Both of these are structural repair items. The walls are sinking, and there are issues with the walls, probably issues with the footing. What we need to do is get a geotechnical consultant to come in and do some testing of the soil, see what's causing the footings, assuming there are footings to sink, and figure out a way to pier it up and then do replacement to those walls before they reach a failure point. And obviously, they're both rec centers, so there are a lot of people there, but particularly older people, younger people. So it presents a hazard to our public that use those facilities. So the next one is the O'Fallon and Cronolette Park YMCA. And so last year there was a pretty big number on this, still a pretty big number. And we asked for some details from the Parks Department. So for this $4 million critical item at Cronolette, and these are combined together, items that they would replace are the indoor pool heater. Currently that is only running on one pool heater. Replace 2 domestic hot water heaters, install a fan wall unit for the pool dehumidification unit, tile the women's locker room and shower areas, because of the fact that the paint is continuously peeling in there from the humidity, cement the outdoor activity area, particularly around the outdoor pool and the lazy river, where they did cutouts for plantings. Whenever the wind blows, you have all the plantings and debris in the pool, and it creates a problem. So it would take the plantings out of there and fill those in with concrete. Remove and replace the sidewalks in the Circle Drive area. Provide a spare pool pump. Paint the slide tower on the inside, which would be the removal and repainting. Boiler and HVAC funding was gathered through capital, but this would also supplement that, as well as a roof replacement. Now, you got to keep in mind about both these rec centers is that they came into existence in about 2009, 2010. So they're well over 10 years old, and they are used actually 15 years old, and they're used very hard. And so need to keep up on those facilities. And then at O'Fallon Park, is an LED light conversion, replacement of metal detectors, and a total redo of the gymnasium flooring, which is due for that. So all those items are encompassed in that $4 million critical project for both those facilities, which are, again, highly used. The next item is pool fencing, $600,000. This is for outdoor fencing at pools at Marquette and Chambers and Fairgrounds. We had allocated $500,000 previously to this item, $550,000 previously, and the estimate is actually twice that. So if we add another $600,000 to it, we'd be able to install the fencing at all 3 of the parks. The next item is recreation center electrical upgrades at 3 recreation centers for $600,000. Those are Gamble, Cherokee, and Buda rec centers. Then we get to forestry. Now I'll do this one and then we'll stop and see if anybody has any questions. And so the first item is hazardous tree removal. And that item is to complete overdue work orders, removal of hazardous trees throughout the city, public safety issue with the hazardous trees. And this will fill the void of vacant positions at forestry. And then there's also an item for ash tree removal for $550,000. This one is to reduce the strain on the forestry division by removing dead and dying ash trees due to the emerald ash borer. Let's see, reducing safety hazards of dying ash trees, and dead trees throughout the city, and reduce this particular population of tree species. The next item on the list is, security lighting at 1415 North 13th. I would ask you to remove that item from the list. We came up with building maintenance funds and work with the forestry division on that, so that is already being completed, no longer needed. And then there's an additional item on here for parking lot lighting at the same facility. That is the Mangelsdorf Seed Building, the old Mangelsdorf Seed Building on 13th Street. And basically what happens is all the forestry equipment is parked outside in a fenced area. They've had a lot of thefts and damage to their equipment from people breaking in and stealing items. So those are the parks and forestry items. I'll stop there.
Questions on parks? Yeah, and we'll be going, making presentation to the Citizen Advisory Committee. And as Rich mentioned, we do ask for a little bit more detail on some of the lump sum items. So these will be fleshed out, and when we come back, we should have some more descriptive items on what some of the larger dollar amounts, identifying what some of the larger dollar amounts are broken up into.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, Noel.
Thanks, Paul. I was just wondering if it would be possible to get some of these line items, in particular, the ones around HVAC upgrades, the interior rec center renovations, the electrical panels, broken out by rec center.
Rich?
So I would say that what generally happens is we allot the money to the Parks Department, and they work with my facilities folks to see what are the most critical needs at that time. It's a very dynamic thing. I'm afraid if we started breaking them out by particular items, then you're leaving it up to this committee to choose what to fund by rec center, as opposed to the operations people funding it by need, as what comes up. I mean, so I would prefer we don't do that for that particular reason.
I'm sorry, to clarify, I didn't mean it in this capital needs inventory or in our appropriation, but just for the committee to have that information. In part, that's because I think a useful way to think about this sometimes is what does a particular rec center need in order to bring it up to the standards that our residents expect, and just understanding how much each rec center needs can be a useful exercise.
But one of the things that Paul has asked the comptroller's office for is a report on the projects that have been completed. And what used to happen is we could run a query on this, and it would give us a list of the projects completed and where they were completed. It would have been very easy to distribute that. If Paul's successful in getting from the comptroller's office what he's asking for, that would be very easy to show you what has been spent where. And I think that's what you're interested in.
A little bit also in the need, like to name a really concrete example, Marquette Rec Center, if I'm not mistaken, at least as of a few weeks ago, was still closed. It may still be, you tell me, but what would it take in terms of, and I know that may have to do with boilers there, which may have already been allocated. But understanding what the different rec centers need is what I'm looking for.
Well, I think we would have to ask for that from Parks and Rec and have them provide, kind of a breakdown of what is there. What I'm giving you is what they provided to Paul for the capital request in larger general terms. So I would assume they should be able to do that, but that would be something we would have to ask them for.
Yeah, and I think that's worth asking for from those departments. When you submit a particularly large item, to break it up into, obviously they're creating an estimate based on some assumption of the condition at their various facilities. So to the extent, and I understand there's a lot, and you can't be that as specific as you want, but to the extent they have specifics, I think the more specific detail, the more useful it is in assessing need and funding level. So, but anyway.
I
Thank you.
would chime in is that on the recreation center electrical upgrades, I think that has to do with trying to make them as functional as they can as learning labs, because many of the rec centers have two-prong outlets and nobody does that anymore. So there were those kind of problems that came into play that people didn't think about when they were initially coming up with all these other projects to do. So as they look around, they now know that most places don't use a two-prong. I know there's a correct electrical term for that, so that we are looking at where else do we have those in the city, in the rec centers that are going to be a problem as we try to move forward and become more technical on things, and how antiquated some of the older buildings are as far as electrical things. So, Noel, I think that's part of where that came from. But they do have a more in-depth list of this that they could probably get to us by the end of the week. And I'm only saying that because the administrative person is not in today, and maybe get us more information on some of the things that they're trying to do, and some things that we need to look at from them. So.
Makes sense. Thank you.
I think three-prong is the technical term, Nancy.
It's actually grounded versus non-grounded.
See, I knew that was going to happen. I fixed my statements. So.
You knew what you had. Okay. Ready for?
Fire department, D.
Yes, D.
Okay, fire department. So at the top of the list, item number 1, there are 30 fire stations throughout the city. This is again one of these items, kind of like the rec centers, where HVAC plumbing upgrades in all the houses. Most of those houses were redone in the 1980s, late 80s, early 90s. And between then and now, we have piecemealed most of these things together. So again, many of the units that have broken, we've made parts for because you cannot buy them anymore. So this is really facilities management looking at 30 fire stations, saying, which ones have these problems, and, putting a plug on them as they go along. And what happens is if we don't fund an item like this, then typically Rick Ernst pays for it out of his facility repair budget, which Paul is very generous with him about, or then he comes to me looking out of miscellaneous building repairs, because those facilities are occupied 365 days a week, 24 hours a day. So there's always people there, and there's not an opportunity to say something can't work or doesn't work. It always either works or we fix it. So that's what that item is critical for. The next item is replace carpet with vinyl in 16 out of the 30 fire stations. This seems cosmetic, but it's really not. Again, the carpets were roll stock carpet that were put in the late 80s, early 90s. Much of this carpet has gathered up. It is a tripping hazard, is just filthy dirty. And really what we've done in a couple of the fire stations is fire has funded some of these. We've funded some of these. We put in heavy duty vinyl tile that the firemen can literally mop, sweep, and it's much more efficient than having carpet in a fire station, which probably should have never been there in the first place. And that is about a $400,000 project to do 16 of them. The next on the list is fire station driveway aprons and driveways. These are the leadway driveways, aprons that lead from the street into the buildings. Many of them have broken and cracked and sank. The fire trucks are extremely heavy. They need to be removed, and we need to put in extra thick concrete with rebar and so forth to make sure that it is up to the standards of the weight of the single axle fire trucks that are being purchased today. The next is a training tower retrofit for $500,000. My understanding from the fire chief is they really don't even burn fires in the training tower at this time because there are a number of requirements that have to be upgraded within that facility to meet all the requirements for a burn building. And so until we would do something on that order, they train in the building, but they actually do not utilize it for its full potential, which is to burn fires in it and train firefighters. And then the last item on this particular list is new mattresses. Please remove that from the list. That's already been funded and the PO is already out on the street. So we will get those when that is all completed. You turn to the next page, you will see, go to the next page, Paul. This is the fire vehicle inventory. I'm not going to get into a lot of details on it. Chris Amos is here. If we have questions, he can get into that. The critical funding is $2.45 million. ESD recommends funding of $820,000. That $820,000 means it is the bare minimum that we need to keep the fleet in a position where it is operational. Now, we have constantly been replacing fire trucks. We have a reserve fleet of fire trucks and ambulances, but that $820,000 represents a minimum funding recommendation from ESD. So I'm going to stop there on fire. If there's any questions on fire.
It looks like the 820 is for the two ambulances. And then also, historically, and this is more a question, and I can, Judy, for the comptroller's office, historically, our funding of fire capital was largely done through GO. And I know we did the GO recently, and our authorization was 50 million. We issued the 21, and it's structured to for new issues when the levy is going to decline. So that it's not a tax increase. It's more capturing that part of the levy that is going to decline, so we can issue more debt. So and Judy, we may have to discuss this, but in terms of the comptroller's office and in their debt section, when is that next rollback supposed to happen? I know we didn't have one last year. Potentially, is it this year or is it the following year? That's something we can discuss, because I would like to know when we're going to have a shot at another GO issuance.
I'm not sure, Paul, but I'll find out.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, Rich.
All right, let's go on to police, which is E. So first item on that list is EST Fleet Services repair to HVAC and lighting conversion to T12 to LED. There's some basic HVAC repairs in the police garage. This 24/7 facility repairs all the police vehicles as well as all the command vehicles and ambulances for the fire department. Obviously, changing over to LED lighting is energy efficient, and the units over there for the HVAC repair are from the original building that was built, and that building was actually constructed sometime in the, I believe it was late 80s, early 90s as well. So these units are well beyond their useful life, and that's a $550,000 project. The next one is SLMPD, North Patrol, Central Patrol, South Patrol, Substation Electronic Door Controls. We already funded that one, so please remove that item from your list, number 8. Same thing for number 9, the hydronic boilers, heating of North Central and South Patrol. We already funded that one. Please remove number 9 from your list as well. The next item is a comparison microscope for the police forensic lab. And so the purchase of a comparison microscope for the firearms section, a microscope is necessary to analyze bullets and casings from one case to another. The firearms section has a staff of 6 examiners. The unit has 4 microscopes to share amongst the 6 examiners. However, only 3 of the scopes were purchased in this decade, and the fourth has exceeded its 10-year life expectancy rule for this type of equipment, as well as there are mechanical issues with it as well. So that would replace a comparison microscope for $50,000. The next item is a gas tomograph spectrometer. And the description of that is purchase the gas mass spectrometer for a drug section to analyze various controlled substances. The GCMS is necessary to identify various chemical substances. This identity is needed to determine if an individual violated the Missouri Controlled Substance Law. And that is a $120,000 item. The next item on the list is replace a 25-ton air handling unit and controls for the locker room and handball court at the academy, $175,000 item. This unit is over 50 years old, cannot be repaired, and is in extremely poor condition. The next item is item number 55. These are all a series of HVAC equipment for a bit here. This is at the academy, water-cooled classroom HVAC, $150,000. It's a 15-ton unit that's for the computer classroom. It is over 30 years old and is rated in poor condition. The next is a split system classroom HVAC at the academy, 30-ton unit, over 40 years old, and it's rated in poor condition. The next is 57, is a split system HVAC at the academy, 15-ton unit, over 40 years old, and in poor condition, $175,000. The next is a split, 58 is a split system simulator room HVAC unit at the academy, 200,000, 10-ton unit, 40 years old and rated in poor condition. 59, water pressure plumbing throughout the academy building, estimated $125,000. The entire water pressure system is rated in poor condition and continually leaks. Number 60, the cooling tower and piping. This is a 25-ton unit. It's over 50 years old and rated in poor condition. 61 at the academy, air handling unit, one heat only for the gym, $80,000 unit replacement. It was put in the early 1990s. It's in poor condition, and it is 500 MBH, which is 1,000 BTU per hour system. 63 is Academy RTU number 1 for the gym, $125,000 replacement, 20-ton unit, rated in fair condition, is 10 years old. And then the Academy RTU number 2, rooftop unit number 2, $125,000, 20-ton unit, 10 years old, rated in fair condition. And the remaining 2 items on the list are security upgrade to the lobby, and the write-up from the police's security upgrade to the lobby. So apparently there are some items that they would like to get done in the lobby area at the Olive Street headquarters building, in the lobby. And then the last one is number 66, partial radio system replacement, $3 million. The manufacturer announced that the city's current 18-year-old radio communication system will reach the end of support in 2029. This request begins a multi-year purchase to systematically replace those items that will reach the end of useful life in 2029. And I believe that is the list for the police, for the buildings. If you go to the next page, I'm going to ask you to remove this sheet. This is from last year. So page to the next page. And it should be the vehicles.
Yeah, that's right.
Keep going forward. Keep going. So this stop right there. So this is the SLMPD vehicle replacement. Again, Chris is here if you have specific questions on this. Critically needed 4.8 $326. ESD recommends, minimum recommendation of $3.7 million. We have put substantial money into police vehicle replacements, but Chris could certainly answer questions on those as far as what that $3.7 million is for. And that should be the end of police.
All right.
Questions on police?
This is Chris, if I may add something to that. The 3.7 million is what the police department needs in total for their fleet to stay up to speed with their current operations. It doesn't necessarily have to be all capital, but the combination of whatever they get in general fund and what they get from capital needs to add up to 3.7 million. Otherwise, they lose ground. And so the critical vehicles that they need to be replaced are 21 additional Scout Tahoes, that's the marked patrol cars, and 28 detective vehicles, which are there in note number 4 on that page. So I guessed in the past what we needed to do for capital to recommend to you, but then the amount that ended up in general fund wasn't what the police department was expecting. So this time I'm not going to suggest where to draw the line. I think the budget division is better capable of telling you what the right numbers are. As long as they add up to 3.7, they don't lose ground. If they're less than that, the fleet gets a worse condition than it is today.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Noel.
Thanks. There's a few items on the police department inventory here which relate to the communications building. Replacing worn out tile, installing new automation system, logging recorder, and then of course the big critical item is the radio communications, partial radio system replacement. And then there's also a big needed item, radio communications relocation. What is the future of the communications building in light of the public safety access point development, and how will that affect these items?
So my understanding is when the PSAP is completed, the communications building will be the secondary 911 answering point as a redundancy for the city. And it will also still remain to be the place where the radios and so forth are repaired for police and I believe fire as well. So the building will still remain in its existence once the PSAP is completed at this moment.
What is the address of that building, out of curiosity? Do we have that?
The radio communications building is, I believe it's a Spruce Street address, but I don't have it. I can get it for you.
Okay, so it's right by the old headquarters?
It's right next door between the old headquarters and the medical examiner. Yes, and the forensic lab.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything
Okay.
else for police?
Okay. Let's go to F, corrections and other public safety.
By the way, for equipment, when rolling stock, I always ask Chris to provide the entire fleet. So when we recommend replacements, we've got a context for that. And that's why the inventory is attached there. Okay.
Okay. So this is corrections of the public safety. The two items on this page 7 and 8, the rooftop chiller unit at the CJC and upgrade technology to digital camera system for $250,000. So two things I want to say. For 7, we currently have a jail grant that we have been working on with the state of Missouri, which is resolving a number of items over there, which HVAC component replacement, so forth. And that is all on top of the $22 million project that we did over there previous, fixing the locks and roofs and other things over there. So for 7, it is a critical item, but I would prefer that we wait until we see what the jail grant covers dollar wise. And so leave it as a critical item, but it is not at the top of the list at the moment. And then the upgrade the technology to the digital system. What I really think needs to happen with that is we have a new corrections commissioner coming on board. And I believe that it would be in our best interest to really see what his priorities are for that facility before we take this item for digital technology, which was on there from, previous commissioner and other folks, and we revisit that with Mr. Burris and find out what his priorities are, if you will. But that would be my recommendation. Okay. And then the next item on the list is the public safety answering point. I just want to talk about this one for a couple minutes because this is a large project. It is, we still have $10 million on the table that we're asking for. Project is about $51 million project. Currently we have, about $41.25 million in the bank for the project. Money from EcoDevo, from the ARPA funding, and from, a couple other miscellaneous funding sources, including the state of Missouri with a $10 million grant. This project, just to renew your mind on what this is, state-of-the-art emergency communication facility, 911 call taking, dispatching functions for police, fire, EMS, Office of Violence Prevention, as well as the city's Emergency Operations Center, EOC, and SEMA, City Emergency Agency, built on the west end of the existing St. Louis Fire Department headquarters at Jefferson and Cass, central mission critical facility to support both day-to-day operations and emergency stand-up operations with associated utility technology and operation infrastructure, sustain 365 24/7 operations and support all first responder agencies under any and all extreme conditions. The new facility will serve the city's current needs and is designed to accommodate future expansion. It's approximately a 28,000 square foot facility, which will have 44 telecommunications center stations and support facilities. The project is a result of a study that was commissioned by the city of St. Louis in 2008, which reviewed economic, operation, and technical feasibility of forming a joint intra-city communications center. The project started in April of 2019. FGM Architects designed the project feasibility study and completed design. And then we have employed Cosney Wagner to build the project, contracted with them, and the project is currently under construction at this time. Now, I want to be really clear that this additional $10 million is really the internal operation of the building. So we're working on the shell of the building, the site, all these things with the funding that we have. This remaining $10 million is actually everything that goes inside the building, all the brains, all the electronics, everything that makes it to a 911 center. So there's still $10 million that is needed to get to our needed amount of a little over $50 million. So that is a critical need. And again, we are currently under construction of that facility now. The next two items under SEMA, there is a video wall and operations communications center upgrade. I would ask you to remove both of those items. I spoke with the commissioner last Friday evening, and with the light that the PSAP will be online by the end of 26. she would like to forego those two items, so please remove those from your list. If we, what we got on the next page?
I had a quick
Oh,
question.
right.
All right, so then, okay, so that is all of corrections. F and other public safety questions on that before we move on.
Yeah, Christina's
Yeah.
got a question.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. For the, thanks for the update on the PSAP. So if we expect it to be online by end of 2026, our goal should be between all the various sources we have to secure the last 10 million within that time, or we need it this year, like in order to get that work done to be online by end of 2026.
Right, so here's what I would say, to be online by 2026, you would want to obviously get the money sooner than later. I would think a portion of the money would be good. We have to build the building before we can put all the
Mhm.
items inside of it. We have the design completed. It's a matter of building it out. There are probably, and Paul can comment on this probably a little more than I, with other opportunities for Eco Devo funding or things along those lines, but it is a general capital need, and I would say the sooner we had the money, the better. Like every other piece of technical equipment in the world, you have to order these things and they all have a lead time to them. So, if we wait too long, what happens is it delays the funding. We say 2026, obviously, because it's public safety, and we'd like to have it tomorrow if we could. But what that date is really, dependent on is the ARPA funds that are in there. So we have to have the building built and spend those funds by the end of 26 or we lose them. So we're going to definitely do that. We would like to have the facility open in 26. So the sooner we get the money, the better.
Thank you.
Yeah, Christina, also in supplementing those, there is a portion of the public safety economic development sales tax allocation. I believe this year we budgeted a 1.4 million plus for PSAP. We should be able to do that next year as well. So that'll at least nip some of that. But the rest, yeah, the rest we have to identify somewhere.
Just going back to my previous comment, especially if this additional 10 million is for kind of internal build out, and presumably that includes the technology. I would pose the question, or if it can be passed on to the police department, of whether that may cover the need for the partial radio system replacement. That's currently a $3 million critical need under their bucket. And then very much agree, Rich, with your point that it makes sense to allow the incoming corrections commissioner to review this list of capital needs and make possible additions. I know he issued a report with preliminary findings, which I presume include some capital needs. And so I think what you said makes a lot of sense. I know it's not the typical process with capital requests due earlier in the year, but given the fact that we do have a new corrections commissioner, it makes sense to set him up for success.
So I would respond back to the radio system. So the radio system that they're referring to is the Motorola 800 megahertz system, which all the police have in their vehicles, their cars, and so forth. When we buy the radio system to go into PSAP, it will match whatever the police have. But if I recall correctly, the last time we bought all upgraded radios for the police, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of about $3.1 million. So I would say it probably is not inclusive of anything that we have in the 10 million for the PSAP.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. We're running long.
We'll move on to G, which is other municipal buildings. And so the first item on the list is medical examiner, surgical room lighting, 120,000. That's basically replacing the lighting in the room where they do autopsies. I think that pretty much speaks for itself. The lighting that is there is outdated and not working very well. They've asked for this for a few years, so it is something that they need to do their day-to-day work. So that is a critical item. So when we get to the courts, talk a little bit about these as we go here. So the first item is the civil courts building, basement toilet room ventilation. And so that particular one is mechanical room ventilation in that building has already been completed. The restrooms, and there's more than one, so it is not just one, but as all the restrooms in the basement have no ventilation. It is a lot of work to get from the lower part of the basement to get ventilation properly to meet all the code requirements in the building, and that's why that number is so big. And that has been on the list for a number of years to get completed. The next item at civil courts is new water service for $900,000. And so that particular item is, this is the lines at the Carnahan Courthouse and juvenile detention have both broken in the recent past, causing flooding and substantial damage over the past 3 years. And so this is a proactive item. This water service is aged to the building, so it is due to be replaced. That is about a $900,000 item, as opposed to waiting until it fails, floods the basement, and then we have multi-million-dollar worth of damage done to all the equipment. The next item is sound Wi-Fi upgrade, and this in the civil courts building. This all plays hand in hand with these courtroom modernization items, which we have actually given funding to in the past. And I will get to that when we get to the circuit court. But that was originally an $8.4 million item. We did $1 million in capital budget last year, so that item's about 7.4. This plays into that same item, and it's just a matter of whether this is broken out separately or not. I need to look into that one a little bit deeper. The next item on the list is new revolving doors, and it's $100,000 item replacement. And so that particular item is the revolving door is unusable, needs to be repaired due to outdated parts. A new door is required. And the real important part of this is that those revolving doors on all these older buildings like this, they provide HVAC pressurization and an airlock to the building. Every time, people open doors in those buildings, as much as people are coming and going, you can never keep the HVAC system warm or cool. That's why the revolving doors were put there in the first place. So that's a needed replacement for $100,000. The next item on the list, there are a series of these 13, 14, and 15. These are structural repairs to the exterior of the civil courts building, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And so what I will tell you is that, let me get this one here. The court was notified by BPS of extensive additional work needed to address issues that have been discovered since facade repair began in August of 23. Court approved the use of funding of $1.2 million for the purpose of this project. Most recent information resulting from design and post-rain event assessment indicates the project phase should be phased in 3 phases and critical as determined by BPS. And so the first priority is an $825,000 project, and that is the one particular one that needs to be done first. And the way that lays out is project number 1 could be done in 2024. Then over the next 3 years, project number 2 could be done. And then over the next 3 to 5 years, project number 3 could be done. So this is about a 5-year project. And what we would be looking at right now is the $825,000 project to finish phase 1. And then phase 2 and phase 3, we would look at accordingly 1 to 3 and 1 to 5 years further. The next item on the list is, Carnahan Courthouse replace supply and waste piping. Let me get that one. And that particular item is 2 out of 26 waste and drain stacks have been completed to date. We can replace these one by one if needed. So this is the total amount for that. So this is an item where we could do a partial if we wanted to and put some funding towards that. The next one at Carnahan Courthouse is replace revolving doors, same as the last. Parts are not available. It is old and needs to be replaced. And again, HVAC pressurization, airlock for the building. This is something we want to replace before it fails. And then item number 14 for the Carnahan Courthouse is repair of the Market Street entrance steps. They're deteriorating and they're a public safety hazard if not repaired for $150,000. Then we get to the courtroom modernization, which is exactly what I was talking about before, where it was an $8.4 million project. We have put $1 million towards it, so $7.4 million is remaining. There are 31 courtrooms that need upgrade of audio, visual, and digital technology, and the courts is actually working with the first $1 million now to get an RFP to see how far they can go with the first $1 million. And then we move to the family court and juvenile detention center. First item on that list is fence, gate, key card striping, outdoor yard and lot security upgrades for $500,000. That allows juvenile to access the outdoor area securely, add secure paving, a secure parking lot for 24/7 staff. And let's see, this is a $500,000 item. It looks like we have already started some work over there with the general funds for them for $155,000, but this is the additional funding needed to complete all these items. And then modernization detention elevator. That one is acquiring parts is difficult. The elevator is in excess of 40 years old and obsolete, and the elevator needs to be replaced. We had the same problems here in all of our buildings to where at some point you just can't get the parts for them and you need to replace the whole item. And then we have ITSA. They have a couple items. They have a Cisco core switch replacement for $300,000. And that one is the core switch is the main network communication hub for all the city government offices. It goes end of service on 10/31/25. Replacing the core switch this fiscal year will allow us to stay current with secure switch technology and have equipment that has service and maintenance included. So that's $300,000 item. And then they have a Hyper-V server replacement, and that is all city network storage, website, and IT services relying on server nodes, quicker server response times, enhanced user experience, improved uptime, and Dell warranty maintenance on devices. If the production stack goes offline, all city IT services will go down, rendering the city IT useless until parts are found or maintenance techs are located. The city maintains a 7-node Hyper-V stack. The oldest of these devices are nearing the end of their support, requiring third-party warranted service for parts, maintenance, and repair. Then we flip to the next page. And we have a couple items from the circuit attorney. We have a $400,000 restroom renovation. And it says the circuit attorney's office, more than 130 individuals, is visited daily by members of the public, including members of the judiciary, elected officials, community leaders, and crime victims and witnesses. Currently, the 4th floor restroom in the Carnahan Courthouse requires significant work to ensure that they are functional, safe, and reflect the professional standards of this office. The capital request amount includes funds for new flooring, lighting, all necessary plumbing, fixtures, finishes, painting, etc. All right. And then there's also a BWC integration infrastructure new server software. So BWC would stand for body worn cameras. And that one is I don't have a description for that one. So that one, I guess, speaks for itself. It is a new software server for body worn cameras for $300,000.
Yeah, we're about to lose Judy, Rich. Could, Judy, that last item is the telecom. Do you want to update us?
Yes. Yeah, so I'll give the brief intro there and maybe Judy wants to comment on that. And then from the comptroller is a telecom system replacement for $800,000. So telephone upgrade to the Plexar hosted voice systems. Downtown campus includes the following locations: City Hall, Forestry, 1520 Market, Carnahan Courthouse, Juvenile Annex, Communications, Juvenile Center, Civil Courts, Gateway Transportation Center, Morgue, Municipal Garage, Board of Elections, and Building Division on Broadway. The funding for the project to date is total needed was $5,234,529. $1,774,900 was from ARPA. $2,700,000 was from FY25 capital, with a remaining balance of approximately $759,800 to complete the system. So Judy, if you have anything you'd like to add there.
Oh, okay. I'm just gonna say, we are moving forward. There's been a lot of delays here, but a lot of it is because of the staff here. You know, all of our senior telecommunications people had retired. Fred has now come back to help get some of them trained as far as the technicians, but working with AT&T, they are moving forward. I know that they are wiring in City Hall now. They're just about through, I believe, on the 4th floor, and then they'll be coming down from there. And I know that they have also sent somebody over to Carnahan to start looking at what's going to be needed there. So it is moving along. It has been a slow start, but we're gaining a little bit of momentum now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Judy.
Any questions on other municipal buildings?
When, and Judy, go ahead and make your 3 o'clock. I guess one of the questions I have just to round up on telecom systems replacement is how much money is still in that account that you can use while you're getting going. That's
what I think in the ARPA funds is just about completed. And then in the fiscal 25, there's still about $1 million left in there.
okay.
So we're getting close to, I know that she had some more invoices the last week that was going to come out of that fund.
All right, thank you, Judy.
You're welcome.
All right. We have been going late. We want to just talk, I think, high-end level on what the city vehicles are situation.
Yeah, so the final sheets are H1 and H2. So we'll just give you the real quick on this one. So H1 is non-emergency public works rolling stock other than refuse. So it's everything non-emergency public works other than refuse. The critical is $26,750,522. EST recommendation is 13 million. And then on refuse, just refuse by itself, the critical is 491,600. And the recommendation from EST for this funding source is 2 million.
Let me get that. Yeah, there's the second set for refuse. Okay, very good. And of course, we try to get as much as we can for fleet. And Chris works diligently with Rich, and then they draw up priorities. And whatever that funding level, that's where we cut it off at. So with refuse, I should point out that we also include the dedicated funded each year that Chris mentioned. That comes from the operating budget of $1.8 million per year. And that was from the fee increase that was approved a number of years ago. All right, well, that's the total inventory presentation. As I mentioned, this is just the kickoff meeting for capital to get you start thinking about FY26. What we'll be starting later this week with the Citizens Advisory Committee starting Thursday evening at 5:30. We'll be presenting some of the similar materials for this. We'll also be calling in a few departments to go with that. And fleshing out some more detail on some of the categories that we just discussed today. The thinking being that we'll get some input from that Citizen Advisory Committee, and then we'll reconvene as a committee in March to start narrowing down where our funding recommendations will be and go from there. So, and then hopefully I'll have my best and latest and greatest revenue estimates through the third quarter for us to make a recommendation for FY26. So as the calendar flies. So is there anything, and that's all I had today. Is there anything else anyone needs to discuss, or are we good for today? All right.
So I had one thing.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Christine.
Maybe it's a grenade, but I'm just wondering whether part of our discussion should include the impact of tariffs, or if it's just equal across the board. That's the only thing I'm curious about.
Yeah,
That part of our
I know.
determinations.
There's a lot of uncertainty out there, but the only thing I can go with is what I know for certain to be there at a certain time. And so most of our allocations, particularly the largest one being the half-cent, the prior year surplus has been identified and has been deposited per ordinance to the capital fund. Everything else in terms of revenue is obviously dependent upon the economy, how sales tax goes. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a pretty conservative estimate, but it matches what actually we're seeing, and which is that sales tax has been lagging so far this fiscal year, and I've got it less than a 1% growth rate. So
Yeah, I was referring more to our purchasing.
Oh, you're talking about the cost of I see, cost of vehicles. Yeah, that's always an issue. I know Chris has brought in incorporates an inflation cost associated with that, but you're right. To the extent that it's a foreign purchase, absolutely it could affect our cost estimates. But I don't think there's anything. Obviously, we'll have to just play it by ear and see what goes going forward. Right, Ann, I see your Alderwoman Schweitzer. I see your hands up. Go ahead.
Thank you. In that same vein, I think that was a really good question. What is the impact that we should think about with any grants that may not be forthcoming, if there are any that we should be worried about for some matching funds? And then if I missed it, I apologize, Mr. Amos, but if there's any snow removal fleet conversation. And I will say that one of the things, everyone always gets to be a squeaky wheel about something during these conversations. And one of the things that I really want us to be thinking about is cleaning bike lanes. We're doing a lot of new bike lanes in the city of St. Louis, a lot of protected bike lanes, and whether or not there is a plan to purchase a vehicle that can fit there. Because I know that's going to be something that no matter who builds it, the city is going to be expected to maintain it. So that is all I wanted to say for now. And thank you for this robust presentation. It's so interesting. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, that said, that's all for today. Thank you for attending, and we'll be keeping in touch.
Thanks, everyone.